Welcome to the most powerful story you'll ever hear. A story of rejection, struggle, belief, and unstoppable courage. This is not fiction. This is real. This is the story of two broke guys who couldn't pay their rent. So they came up with a crazy idea. Rent out air mattresses in their living room. They were laughed at. They were rejected over 1,000 times. They were drowning in debt. But they didn't give up. Today, that one idea has changed how the world travels. Their startup is now worth over $100 billion, and millions of people across the world sleep in their rentals every single night. Yes, this is the real success story of Airbnb. And if you listen till the end, it will inspire you, teach you, and maybe change your life. From this story, you will learn how to survive when you have no money, how to believe when no one supports you, how to create something world-changing with almost nothing, how to turn rejection into power, and how you too can start from zero. And the best part? You'll also improve your English, because this story is told in simple, powerful, beginner-friendly English. So you learn English while being inspired. So sit back, take a deep breath, because this story is emotional, motivational, and completely unforgettable. Let's begin. Part 1. Two guys, no money, one air mattress. The story begins in the year 2007 in San Francisco, California. Two friends, Brian Chesky and Joe Geppia, were struggling. They had just moved to San Francisco. They were broke. Their rent was $1,150 per month, and they couldn't afford it. They had no job, no big business plan, no savings, just a dream. Let's build something. But dreams don't pay rent. So one day, they saw something interesting. A big design conference was coming to town. All the hotels were completely sold out. Suddenly, Joe had an idea. Joe said to Brian, "What if we rent out our living room? We don't have a bed, but we do have 3 air mattresses." Brian looked confused. "Air mattresses?" Joe smiled. "Yeah, let's offer air bed and breakfast. We'll give them a mattress, some breakfast, and charge them money." It sounded insane, but they were desperate. So they quickly made a simple website just for this small event. They posted it online. "Stay with locals, sleep on an airbed, get homemade breakfast." And then they waited. Soon they got 3 bookings. One from a 30-year-old woman from Boston, another from a father from Utah, and one more from a digital artist from India. They were shocked. Strangers were paying money to sleep in their living room. That weekend, they made $240. Not much, but it was the first time their idea made real money. It felt like magic. But once the design conference ended, the bookings stopped. Their website was empty again. They realized something painful. One small event helped us, but this is not a real business yet. They needed a bigger plan, so they called another friend, Nathan Blakarczyk, a computer engineer. He joined as the third co-founder. Together, the 3 of them began working seriously. They started thinking, what if we build a real platform where anyone, anywhere in the world, can rent out their home to travelers? A platform for hosts and guests, for extra income and cheaper travel. A new kind of travel experience. They renamed the idea Airbnb.com, short for Air Bed and Breakfast. They launched the site, they uploaded listings, they improved the design. But there was one problem. Nobody was using it. 0 users, no bookings, no investors, no money. They were working day and night, but nothing was growing. They had credit card debt over $25,000. They were living on cereal and peanut butter. And one day, they hit rock bottom. Brian looked at Joe and said, "We need money, anything. Even $500 will help." It was 2008, election year in the U.S. Barack Obama versus John McCain. Joe, being a designer, got another wild idea. He designed limited edition cereal boxes. Obama O's, Cap'n McCain's. They filled them with cheap cereal, printed the boxes, and began selling them for $40 each to political fans. Believe it or not, they made $30,000 from cereal boxes. That saved Airbnb. They used that money to keep building the platform. But they still had no users. Now came the hardest part. They went to investors in Silicon Valley to pitch their idea. They were rejected over 1,000 times. Some investors said, "No one will sleep in a stranger's house. This is not a scalable idea. It's too risky, too weird." One investor even said, "This is the worst idea I've ever heard." But Brian, Joe, and Nathan didn't give up. They kept going, even when everyone laughed at them. They were not chasing success. They were chasing survival. They were broke. They were tired. But deep down, they still believed. If we can survive this, we can change the world. And that belief, that unshakable courage, is what kept Airbnb alive when it should have died. Brian Chesky was tired. Joe Gebbia was frustrated. Nathan was debugging the code all day. They sat on the floor in their small apartment in San Francisco, trying to decide what to do next. Then, Brian got an email. It was from a friend who told him, "There's a startup program called Y Combinator. They help small founders like you build big companies. You should apply." Brian had heard of them. Y Combinator YC was famous for helping companies like Dropbox and Reddit. But YC only accepted the best. Would they accept 3 guys renting out airbeds? They didn't know. But they applied. Y Combinator called them for an interview. It was in Mountain View, California, in a small office. Paul Graham, the co-founder of YC, listened to their pitch. Brian was nervous. Joe was sweating. Nathan was quiet. They explained how strangers could sleep in each other's homes. They explained how they rented airbeds and made cereal boxes. At first, Paul looked confused. He said, "People are really doing this? Sleeping in strangers' homes?" Joe replied, "Yes, they're doing it already, and they love it." Paul paused. Then he smiled. He said, "It's weird, it's crazy, but it just might work." Airbnb was accepted into Y Combinator. They received $20,000 in seed funding. Not much, but to them, it felt like $1 million. More importantly, they now had access to mentors, investors, and a network of startup leaders. They finally had a chance. Not success, but a real chance. From January to March 2009, the Airbnb founders worked inside Y Combinator. They had 3 months to prove their idea could grow. 3 months to fix their product, find real users, and build trust. They worked day and night. They improved the website. They added better photos, reviews, profiles, and trust systems. They changed the whole feel of Airbnb. No more just airbeds. Now it was. Rent out any space, a bed, a room, even your whole house. And they focused on one city only, New York City. Brian and Joe flew to New York with almost no money. They found every Airbnb host in the city. They went door to door, meeting them in person. They took professional photos of each home. They sat down with hosts. They taught them how to write good descriptions. They explained how to build trust with guests. This was not digital. This was human. And it worked. Hosts felt respected. Guests saw better listings. Bookings slowly increased. Back in San Francisco, Nathan worked on the code. He built a booking system, payment gateway, and safety features. Meanwhile, in New York, Brian and Joe worked with users every day. Their strategy: if we can make Airbnb work in one city, we can repeat it everywhere. And slowly, it started to work. They went from 5 bookings a week to 20 bookings, then 100 bookings. Then something big happened. In March 2009, during Y Combinator's final presentation day, known as Demo Day, Airbnb pitched their idea to investors. They showed the growing number of users, real stories from New York, their new website, and a vision. One day, people will travel the world, not through hotels, but by staying with locals. Some investors were still unsure, but a few believed. They raised $600,000 in seed funding. Then a journalist from TechCrunch wrote an article. Airbnb, rent a couch, meet the world. That article exploded. It went viral. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Airbnb. With the new money and publicity, Airbnb began expanding. First New York, then Los Angeles, then Chicago, then Paris, London, Berlin. People in different countries began listing their homes. Travelers found cheaper, more unique places to stay. It was no longer just about saving money. It was about experience, about meeting locals, feeling at home in a foreign land. The community began to grow, not just a product, but a movement. Airbnb took a small commission from each booking, around 10% to 15%. As bookings grew, revenue exploded. They hired new people. They built customer service teams, safety protocols, and review systems. Still, they faced a big challenge. Can we make people trust strangers? So they created verified IDs, host guest messaging, ratings and reviews, secure payment system, 24/7 customer support. Trust became their brand, and with every booking, trust grew stronger. Not everything was perfect. In 2011, a host in San Francisco said her apartment was damaged badly by a guest. It was all over the news. People began asking, is Airbnb safe? The company acted fast. They apologized. They introduced $1 million host guarantee insurance. They showed the world that they cared. That moment could have killed Airbnb, but instead, it made them stronger. Airbnb started with an air mattress, then a design event, then cereal boxes, then 1,000 rejections, then a chance, and a breakthrough. Now they had real momentum. They were growing, people were joining, and the world was listening. But the real test was still ahead. Global expansion, regulations, big cities trying to ban them, hotels declaring war. Part 2. The battle to build a global brand. Airbnb was growing fast. Their platform was working. People were using it in cities all over the world. Hosts were opening their homes. Guests were booking nights in New York, Paris, London, Tokyo, Berlin. The idea of live like a local was no longer just a slogan. It was a global movement. But when you grow fast, you attract attention. Some of it is good, some of it dangerous. In this part, Airbnb enters a new stage, a battle for trust, survival, and global expansion. Let's begin. Between 2011 and 2013, Airbnb expanded into more than 190 countries. That's right. In just a few years, it became one of the fastest-growing travel companies in the world. They now had over 500,000 listings in 33,000 cities across 192 countries. They opened offices in Paris, London, Berlin, Sydney, São Paulo, Beijing. They hired teams who understood local cultures, laws, and languages. This was no longer three guys in an apartment. This was now a company with hundreds of employees and millions of users. Airbnb was becoming a global travel empire. But that kind of success, it comes with problems. As Airbnb grew, cities around the world started pushing back. Governments were confused. They said, "Are these homes, hotels? Are these renters, business owners? Who's paying tax? What about safety rules?" Cities like New York, Paris, Barcelona, Tokyo, and San Francisco began creating strict rules. In some places, Airbnb was even banned. Hotel associations got angry. They said, "Airbnb is killing our business. They are stealing our guests." They began campaigning against Airbnb, spending millions to influence local laws. Some cities passed new regulations. Hosts had to register. Rentals were limited to certain days. High taxes were added. Suddenly, Airbnb was not just a tech company. It had become a political company. Airbnb didn't fight back with anger. They used strategy, law, and communication. They built public policy teams in each region, hired lawyers to work with local governments, created tax agreements to help cities earn money, introduced new safety and trust programs. They said, "We don't want to break laws. We want to work with cities. Airbnb is not the enemy. We're the future of travel." This made a difference. In many places, instead of being banned, Airbnb was accepted with new rules. While the legal battles continued, Airbnb focused on its most powerful weapon, the community. They began organizing meetups with hosts, workshops in local neighborhoods, success stories on YouTube, TV, and social media. They showed the world. Airbnb helps normal people make money. Single moms, retired couples, students, all earning income from their spare room. And it was true. Many people were surviving only because of Airbnb. This emotional connection became the heart of their brand. Airbnb was no longer just about beds. It was about belonging. They launched a new mission statement, "Belong anywhere." And people around the world began to believe in it. With growing users, global reach, and a strong brand, investors now saw Airbnb as the future of travel. From 2013 to 2015, Airbnb raised over $1.5 billion from big venture capital firms. The company's valuation jumped from $1 billion to $10 billion, to over $25 billion in just 2 years. That made Airbnb more valuable than most hotel chains, even though Airbnb didn't own a single building. Let that sink in. No hotels, no rooms, no buildings, just a website, a vision, and a community. That's the power of digital. That's the power of belief. Now that Airbnb had money, it wasn't just about homes anymore. They began offering experiences, cooking classes, bike tours, local adventures, luxury rentals, villas, castles, private islands, business travel options, insurance for hosts and guests, Airbnb Plus, high-quality verified homes. They even bought other companies, a design company for better user experience, a hotel booking site, a social travel company. Airbnb wanted to be the future of how we travel, live, and connect. And they were doing it. By 2016, Airbnb had hosted over 100 million guests. They had 2.5 million listings. They were in almost every country on Earth. They were on the covers of Forbes, Time magazine, and Wired. TV shows, news channels, travel blogs. Everyone was talking about them. They were no longer just a startup. They were a movement. But something was coming, something no one expected, something that would shake the travel world to its knees. Part 3. The crisis that nearly killed Airbnb. It was March 2020. Airbnb, a global travel company, was standing on top of the world. More than 100 million guests, more than 7 million listings, operating in 190-plus countries, valued at over $35 billion, and preparing for a massive IPO, initial public offering. But then, COVID-19 arrived, and everything collapsed. Borders were closed, planes were grounded, hotels, homes, and Airbnbs sat empty. Countries went into lockdown. Cities turned silent. People were afraid to travel. Some weren't even allowed to leave their homes. And Airbnb, a company built on travel, movement, and human connection, was now in the middle of a disaster. Almost overnight, their business was gone. Airbnb's revenue dropped by 80% in just 8 weeks. That's not a small dip. That's like falling off a mountain. Cancellations flooded the system. Millions of dollars had to be refunded. Hosts were angry. Guests were scared. Employees were confused. The future was dark. Brian Chesky, the CEO, later said, "It felt like I was watching a car crash in slow motion. And I was the one driving." This was no longer about growing the company. It was about saving it. By May 2020, Airbnb was burning money fast. The company was losing hundreds of millions of dollars every month. They had to make a decision, or the company would die. Brian Chesky and the leadership team did something heartbreaking. They decided to lay off 25% of the entire company. That was 1,900 employees, people who had worked there for years, people who loved Airbnb, people who believed in the mission. It was the hardest moment in Airbnb's history, but the way they handled it was different. Most companies fire people and walk away, but Airbnb did it with humanity, honesty, and love. Here's what they did. Each laid-off employee received a minimum of 14 weeks' pay. Airbnb kept their laptops so they could job hunt remotely. They built a special talent directory to help other companies hire them. The CEO personally wrote a public letter explaining everything with full transparency. They gave extra equity to employees so they could still benefit from Airbnb's future. And at the end of the letter, Brian Chesky wrote, "This is not just a company, it's a mission, and it's filled with people who made it magical. Even in pain, Airbnb chose love. Now that travel was frozen, Airbnb had to rethink everything. They started asking, what do people need right now? What can Airbnb offer if the world isn't traveling?" And they listened. People were tired of being stuck at home. They were looking for safe, local getaways, homes with long-term stays, private, clean, remote places to work or isolate, small cabins, countryside cottages, and peaceful hideaways. Airbnb made a massive shift. They added new categories, monthly stays, work-from-anywhere homes, enhanced cleaning listings, flexible cancellation options, near-me search features. They also launched Airbnb online experiences, where people could join virtual cooking classes, music lessons, meditation sessions, and more from home. Suddenly, Airbnb became more than travel. It became about connection, learning, and healing. This pivot worked. Slowly, bookings started returning, not for international travel, but for domestic getaways. People in the US, Europe, and Australia began booking local trips within driving distance. Instead of hotels, they chose private homes, cleaner, safer, and more personal. By late 2020, Airbnb was starting to breathe again. And then, something even bigger happened. In early 2020, Airbnb had canceled its plan to go public. But now, after surviving the storm, they reopened that plan. In December 2020, Airbnb went public on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. On the day of the IPO, Airbnb's shares were priced at $68 per share. But the stock opened at $146 per share. The company was instantly worth over $100 billion. That made it the biggest IPO of the year and one of the biggest in tech history. People couldn't believe it. Just 8 months earlier, Airbnb was collapsing. Now, it had become a $100+ billion comeback story. After the IPO, Airbnb didn't lose its heart. They doubled down on their mission: to help anyone feel like they belong, anywhere in the world. They began investing in hosts, with better support, tools, and training. Safety, with 24/7 support, identity checks, and community standards. Sustainability, encouraging green living and eco-friendly travel. Accessibility, making travel possible for all abilities and ages. They also created a host endowment fund to give money back to the host community over time. Airbnb was no longer just about homes. It was about hope. By 2022 and 2023, Airbnb had hosted over 1.4 billion guests, grown to over 150 million users, offered 6 million plus active listings worldwide, maintained a market value between $70 to $100 billion. They were no longer just surviving. They were leading. And they continued to evolve, with new innovations like Airbnb categories, treehouses, tiny homes, castles, Airbnb rooms for solo travelers, guest favorites filter, AI tools for better hosting and planning. They even introduced Airbnb.org, a nonprofit program to house refugees, emergency workers, people displaced by war or disaster. Today, Airbnb is more than a travel company. It's a brand that stands for human connection, economic empowerment, adventure with trust, community and creativity. And it all started with a problem: can't pay rent. A crazy idea: air mattresses. A rejected startup, 1,000 times. And an unbreakable belief: their journey is not finished. But it has already changed how the world thinks about travel, home, business, and belonging. Joe Gebbia was always different. Even as a child growing up in Atlanta, Georgia, he was obsessed with design and creativity. He went to Rhode Island School of Design, or ISD, one of the best art schools in America. That's where he met Brian Chesky. And they became roommates. While other students dreamed of careers in big companies, Joe had a wild idea. What if we used design to change the world? He believed in beauty, simplicity, and emotion, not just in art, but in human experience. When Airbnb was just an idea, Joe wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about how to make people feel at home, how to design trust between strangers, how to make ordinary people feel special when they travel. He used his design thinking to shape Airbnb's logo, the website's simplicity, the colors, images, and flow, the emotional connection behind belong anywhere. Joe believed that design could solve human problems, and Airbnb became proof of that. Brian Chesky wasn't a business guy. He was a bodybuilder in college and also a designer. He had no MBA, no tech background, no CEO experience. But when Airbnb began to grow, he had to become a leader, fast. And leadership wasn't easy. Brian had to fire people he cared about, sit in investor meetings where they laughed at him, make decisions that affected millions of lives, stand in front of cameras and explain problems during global crises. At one point, when the company was drowning in debt, Brian wrote in his journal, "I feel like I'm swimming in the middle of the ocean, with no land in sight, and I'm getting tired." But he didn't stop. Instead, he asked himself, "What do I believe in?" And the answer was simple. I believe people are good. I believe travel is magic. I believe the world becomes better when strangers meet and share. That belief made him the kind of leader money can't buy. Today, Brian is still the CEO, and he still signs every letter to the Airbnb community with the same two words: with love. While Brian and Joe were meeting people, pitching ideas, and speaking on stages, there was one man sitting quietly in the background, Nathan Blecharczyk. He was the technical co-founder, the one who built the platform from scratch. Nathan started coding when he was a teenager. He once built a software business in high school that made $1,000 per month, just for fun. He went to Harvard University but never chased big company jobs. He believed in building things that work, not just talking about them. At Airbnb, he created the early website, built the booking system, designed the payment structure, helped Airbnb expand into China and Asia. He never liked the spotlight, but without him, Airbnb would have collapsed. Nathan shows us a powerful truth. You don't have to be loud to be legendary. You don't have to be famous to change the world. While the world saw Airbnb growing, the founders were exhausted inside. They slept in airports during early pitches, ate cheap food because they couldn't afford anything else, missed birthdays, holidays, and weekends with family, burned out from the pressure, were afraid, constantly, that everything might fail. One night in 2010, Brian Chesky stayed in the office until 3 a.m. He was answering emails personally from angry users and confused guests. When someone asked him, "Why don't you sleep?" he answered, "Because this is not just a company. This is my life." They weren't building a business. They were building their soul into a product. And that is what made Airbnb different from other companies. It wasn't about money first. It was about people first. In the early years, their families didn't understand. Joe's parents once said, "You went to art school to rent out airbeds? What are you doing with your life?" Brian's friends laughed. "You let strangers sleep in your house? Are you crazy?" Nathan's relatives thought he should work at Google. They faced embarrassment, doubt, financial stress, emotional confusion. They didn't party. They didn't buy expensive things. They worked and worked and worked. For years, nothing worked. But then, everything did. And that is how legends are built. Part 4. The dream that belonged to the whole world. After years of pain, pressure, rejection, and risk, Airbnb had finally become one of the most valuable and loved brands on earth. But the real success? It wasn't just in their valuation, not the IPO, not the billions of dollars, not the headlines. The real success was this. They changed how the world feels when it travels. They changed what it means to be a stranger. They created belonging in a world full of distance. Before Airbnb, people thought, you need a hotel to feel safe. You need big companies to feel comfortable. You need money to travel the world. But Airbnb showed something different. They proved that a normal person can be a host. A small apartment can feel like home. A human connection can be more powerful than 5 stars on a wall. They created a new category of life, somewhere between home and hotel, somewhere between business and friendship, somewhere between fear and trust. Airbnb didn't just build a company, they built a culture. At the heart of everything, from the first airbed to the billion-dollar IPO, was one simple belief. People are good. That's it. The entire company was built on the belief that if you give strangers a chance, they'll surprise you. If you give trust, you'll receive it. If you open your door, you might open your heart too. It's not just about travel. It's about humanity. Brian Chesky once said, "We used to live in a world where everyone locked their doors. We created a world where people unlocked them again." Behind every Airbnb booking, there's a story, like a retired woman in Lisbon who hosts guests to feel less lonely, and now has friends in 40 countries. A single father in Thailand who paid for his daughter's education by renting out a tree house. A cancer survivor in the US who turned her home into a peaceful place for travelers and found new meaning in life. A refugee in Berlin who became a top-rated host and rebuilt his future through hospitality. These stories are not statistics. They are proof that Airbnb became a lifeline, not just a platform. When you sleep in someone's home, you enter their world. And when someone trusts you with their home, they enter your heart. This is how strangers became neighbors, and neighbors became family. And the world became smaller and kinder. Yes, Airbnb is worth over $100 billion. Yes, it has hosted over 1.5 billion guest arrivals. Yes, it operates in more than 220 countries and regions. But that's not what makes it valuable. What makes Airbnb priceless is this. It gave hope to broke artists. It gave income to struggling mothers. It gave adventure to scared solo travelers. It gave peace to lonely souls. It gave people a way to feel at home, anywhere on earth. That's not business, that's meaning. And meaning will always be more powerful than money. Years later, the founders often look back. Brian Chesky once said in an interview, "If Airbnb had failed, I think the world would have been okay, but I wouldn't have. Because Airbnb is not just something I built, it's something that built me." Joe Gebbia reflected, "Design taught me about beauty, but Airbnb taught me about people." And Nathan, the quiet one, said, "You can write perfect code, but in the end, it's the people who matter. And I'm glad I helped them connect." They all could have taken easier jobs. They all could have quit during the cereal box phase, or after 1,000 rejections, or during the pandemic. But they didn't. Because the real product wasn't rooms. It was resilience. This is where the story becomes yours. Because this isn't just about three guys who built a startup. This is about you. Yes, you. Reading this right now. You who has an idea. You who wants to start something. You who's been rejected. You who's broke, tired, doubting, scared. You who thinks maybe you're not enough. Airbnb proves you are. You don't need perfect skills. You don't need big money. You don't need to wait for the right time. You just need an idea, a heart, a reason to begin, and the courage to keep going, even when no one believes. That's it. If you have that, you can build anything. You can change everything. You can take your version of an air mattress and turn it into something that touches the world. What made Airbnb go viral wasn't just their idea. It was their love. Love for people. Love for design. Love for problem solving. Love for travel. Love for storytelling. Love for every small host and curious guest. They cared. And that caring, that emotional fire, burned through rejection, poverty, failure, crisis, and chaos, until it became light for millions. That's what made them unstoppable. And if you carry that same love, if you put heart into your dream, no force in the world can stop you either. From a simple airbed to a $100 billion empire, this is not just a business story. It's a story about struggle, purpose, trust, and building a world where you don't have to be rich to feel at home. Now it belongs to you. This story is not just about business. It's not just about travel. And it's not just about three guys with a crazy idea. This is a story about you. Because Airbnb shows us something powerful. You can start with nothing and still change everything. You can be rejected 1,000 times and still win. You can sleep on the floor today and still build an empire tomorrow. You don't need money. You don't need a big team. You don't need to be perfect. You only need a small idea, a big heart, and the courage to keep going. When the world says no, and when you keep going, when you believe in people, when you build with love, the world will believe in you. 7 life-changing lessons from the Airbnb story. 1. Start small, very small. Even an air mattress can change your life. 2. Believe in your idea, even when no one else does. If they laugh, let them laugh. You build. 3. Solve a real problem. Airbnb worked because it helped people who had no place to stay. 4. Don't give up after rejection. They were rejected over 1,000 times. You're allowed to fail. You're not allowed to quit. 5. Build trust before profit. People don't buy from companies. They buy from people they trust. 6. Be human, always. During the crisis, Airbnb chose kindness over greed, and the world respected that. 7. Success is not about money. It's about meaning. Money grows, but meaning lasts forever. If you are watching this and you've ever felt lost, broke, not good enough, or like your dream is too small, remember this. Airbnb started with $0, 3 airbeds, and a problem. But what made it grow was heart. You have heart too. So don't stop. Build something. Believe. Begin. And one day, your story will inspire the world, just like this one did. Because you didn't just hear a story, you listened, you felt, you learned. And that's how your English grows. By using it to understand real stories, real people, and real dreams. If this story inspired you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs this, and subscribe for more powerful stories that will change your mindset and improve your English at the same time. Let's grow together. Let's learn. Let's dream. This is English Avenue, where every story changes your life. See you in the next video.